MPH Sports Podcast. Talk sport and property with sports people discussing their careers and how property played a part in it.
Scott Davies, welcome to Talk Sport and Property. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Lee. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Thank you for being our very first person on our new pod.
No, mate, it's a privilege. I was going to say, when you mention it to me, it's something that obviously I know a lot about, having spoken to you. So if you can pick my brains and help out some players in the future, then happy days.
Oh, thank you, mate. Well, thanks for all your support. I know you and I know each other well, hence why this was always going to be an interesting interview. But the reason why we called our pod Talk Sport and Property, because we're keen to understand more about how property can play a part in a sports person's career. Now, looking at your career, 388 games, Scott, 49 goals, over a 14-year in professional and semi-professional football. Where did it all start for you?
I think for me, being a youngster, everyone has the dream, don't they, of going on to play professional football, and it seems so far-fetched. It seems like a long way in the distance when you're playing under-six football down the park with your mates. And I think sort of 9 or 10 years old, there was a case where I was being scouted by a number of clubs, and all of a sudden it became a little bit more real and the dream became a little bit closer, I guess. I was lucky enough at 14 years old to be bought for £50,000 by Reading from Wycombe Wanderers. And for me then is probably when I started taking football seriously and realised that I could make a good living out of it, which I did. I spoke about amounts of money that I earned and how much money I wasted because of a gambling problem. I'm sure you'll have players that are completely and utterly sensible with their money, and they will get addicted to buying property. I didn't have that desire, that passion. And I look back now and I think with the amounts of money that I was earning at 19, if I could have invested it a little bit more sensibly, a little bit more wisely, then it would have set me up for a better future than what I have now in terms of finances. I'm not saying I'm in a bad place, but it could have been a lot better.
Okay, well, without ruining all my other questions for this pod, Scott, I'm going to take you back to sort of 15, 16. Was there any pressure on you as a teenager at 15, 16? I mean, I've got a son who's now 14 at QPR. I've seen boys already go to other clubs, such as sort of Category 1 clubs, for, I guess, big money like you did at that age. Does it change you in any way? Do you think that might have had an impact on what you went on to do? And we'll talk more about your gambling later on in the pod.
Yeah, for me, I think that it kind of fills you with this pipe dream. And I feel as though when there's a price tag on your head, you kind of feel as though everything's just going to fall into place. Yeah. If someone had said to me at 13 years old before I got bought for the quite a substantial fee, will you go on and have a life in football? Yeah, probably not. I probably would have said no. But as soon as people are sort of investing money in you, all of a sudden it fills you with this false sense of security that you're going to go on and be a millionaire. Yeah. And I think that 14, 15, 16, I thought to myself, do you know what? This is going to be easy because all I knew was football. I knew that studies didn't really count at the age of 15, 16 when I was going through GCSEs because I had my scholarship. So I kind of put that to the wayside. And I look back on that now with quite a bit of regret. Not that I got bad results or anything from my GCSEs, but it's a world where you put all your eggs into one basket. A lot of players seem to just focus on football. And for me, I think that's dangerous because you can fall out of the system quite quick, whether that's at 16, 18, 19 after you've done a 1-year pro. For me, I was 27, so I was a little bit later. I was a little bit older, but I had nothing to fall back on. And that's when I studied. I went to university for 2 years at the age of 27. So for me, I think it's vitally important now that especially younger players have a drive, a passion for something else other than football. They get a lot of spare time on their hands, and I think it's crucial that they have other interests. And obviously, with you being involved in property, I think that's something that is really appealing to these youngsters because they know that if they do start building a property portfolio, it's pleasing for them, and they know that more often than not, it's going to bode quite well for their futures.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've really valued the time you came to the Etihad with me when we did a workshop there in front of the 18s. I think Man United were there, City were there, Fleetwood, Burnley, Stoke. It was a really great turnout, and it was really invaluable to have you there, because I know you do a lot of public talking yourself, and it was something that at the time I'd never done. And my first gig was in front of 130 odd people in front of the Premier League and at the Etihad. It was a real big occasion, not only for me personally, but for the company as well, because you're trying to demonstrate that integrity and that trust to players, that all you're there to do is provide this information and that advice and give sports people that option to invest in property. It's not to necessarily do it, but it's a consideration that they should think about doing when you start to experience life-changing money. When did you start to personally get life-changing money? When you at Reading, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, or a good question that you asked there. For me, I went from £400 a week to £2,000 a week, which I then earned over the next 4 years. So I earned close to £500,000 in 4 years. I worked out the sums last night before I knew that I was coming on the pod. And I look back now and I think to myself, what did I do with all that money? A lot of it I did gamble, admittedly, which I've spoken about publicly in the past. But then I look back and think, well, I spent quite a lot of money on cars. Cars for me was something that you could drive around. People would see you in your car. Why would I want to buy a house? That was my sort of mindset back then. I thought, well, I might have a house, but for a youngster, a car was the most important thing. And I look back now and with a little bit of sort of craziness, it makes sense, but it doesn't. I know a lot of players that their first thing, once they get that big deal, that big signing on fee, a change in wages, is that they'll think, well, I'll tell you what, I've seen the new striker at the club who's been bought for 5 million driving in an Aston Martin, or I've seen someone driving in a Bentley, when they'll think that they have to copy that trend. But I think buying a house should be everyone's first priority, and a car should come second, watches should come second, wash bags. But it's really difficult to tell youngsters of today that. It would be interesting if you actually did some sort of poll, some sort of stats around what people do with their first pay packet. I'd be really interested to see, because I was one that followed the trend. And I think that when I did start earning money, I had a lot of pressure from my parents. Listen, you need to save up to buy a house. And I did it. I managed to do it at the age of 21. But what I then did is I saved up £30,000 and gambled it away in 15 days. So for me, it was difficult. It's probably a lot different from other players where they didn't have this problem with gambling. So I actually saved up twice for a deposit and managed to do it the second time.
Wow. At what point did you realise you had a gambling addiction? And why do you think you turned to gambling when you're on great money, clearly well thought of, at Reading Football Club? I think was it Brendan Rodgers you had at the time as well?
Yeah. I think for me, what it was I used to see people have nice things. I used to see Les Ferdinand fly to training in a helicopter. He used to fly his helicopter in, park it on the far side of the pitch and walk over to the building. And I believed that gambling would give me everything I wanted, but really it actually took away everything that I wanted. So the money that I wanted to spend on a new car, a new watch, a wash bag, I didn't want to pay for it out of my own account. So I thought that getting involved in gambling might earn me a few pounds, when in the reality of it, it cost me a lot more money than I ever won. So that's probably one of the reasons why I got involved in it. When did I realise it became a problem? Very soon, very early on, when I was lying to people. I was lying to my parents. I was lying to people at the club when I was playing in the Championship under Brendan Rodgers. It ultimately cost me my career at the club. And probably from that day, I was never the same player. I lost a lot of confidence. I felt like I lost my identity. I was Scott the footballer in the hometown where I lived. And then all of a sudden, my professional status had gone. I was 27. I was out of the game. Nobody wanted to sign me. I didn't have a pound in my account. Fortunately, I'd invested a little bit of money into one property. And to this day, it's probably all I had to show for all the money that I earned over the years. There are players a lot worse off than me, and I remind myself of that. So for me, it's just one of those things that if I can try and be a voice to other people that listen to the pod who are a younger age, and they can sort of learn from my mistakes, then happy days.
Oh, definitely. And I think this is one of the reasons why we wanted to create the pod, was to be able to talk to more experienced players like yourself who have played near on for 400 games now, and give that advice back to maybe the next generation. A lot of the workshops we do is mainly for under 23s. It's nice to now get players to sort of have the confidence to reach out to us and say, look, would you mind coming in and have a chat with the boys? You know, we're obviously at first team level now. Because it's real life information, and talking about sort of real life experiences. You mentioned you were 21 when you bought your first flat. Where did it all start? How did you find the experience? Can you remember the reason why you bought it, where you bought it? I mean, I think it's a property you still own today, right?
Yeah, it's actually up on the market right now. So for me, I've had it obviously for a number of years. I didn't get involved in the process, if I'm brutally honest, because I was told to focus on football. I was told to sort of just pass my money over to my parents. They were going to sort out the mortgage. The first time that I actually went to go and try and get a mortgage, I got rejected because of my credit rating at the bank, because of my gambling habits. So I had to wait a couple of years. My parents then got it into their name. But like you say, if you can take away the pressures internally, externally from a player when it comes to buying a house, which I know you guys do, it actually saves a lot of time and a lot of hassle. It's like you say, I never got taught about buying property. I didn't know the first thing about it. And still to this day, I wouldn't say that I'm that clued up when it comes to it, because I was kind of mollycoddled a little bit by my parents who wanted to deal with it. And it was like, listen, just pass me the money. We'll get it all signed and you can move in when it's done. So if someone like you was about when I was younger and you came in and you spoke to a football club, then I think my ears would stick up on end and listen and be interested, because I do like learning. I'm one of those people that will sit there and I'll be a bit of a sponge when it comes to absorbing information. But it just wasn't something that happened back then. So we got told, this is your new contract, spend it how you want. There was no financial advice. There was no property advice. And I think I was one of the people that learned the hard way because of that. There wasn't much help out there, if I'm brutally honest.
Why do you think that is? I mean, we've got a great relationship with the Premier League and the EFL. And I think some of the work they're doing now in education is probably better than ever. What I do tend to find, and this is just an observant point, and maybe things are changing, I don't know, but it often, education tends to stop at first team level, doesn't it? So under 23s, under 18s, I think they're fantastic. You know, the workshops that they do, the information they provide, the life skills program now. You know, we feel privileged that we're part of that. But why do you think that at under 23s or under 21s and under 18s, you've got a consistent wave of new people coming in, providing you with that information, but the moment you get through the doors of the first team, it's almost as if it stops?
Yeah, I think football specifically, but sport in general is a bubble that's hard to burst. There's a lot of like-minded, similar people. Some people will break away from that trend and go and learn about property. They'll go and learn about finance and educate themselves further. But a lot of people feel as though, listen, I'm earning X amount of money a week. When I get to 35, I'm going to have it all stacked up. I'll have a few houses and nice cars. Don't need to worry about investment. So for me, the problem that I think there is that people automatically think that because they're adults, they now know about property. They know how to deal with finance, but they don't. A lot of people that I've met in times in football, I met one of my old teammates, for example, a few weeks back. And he said to me, his questions or his words to me, he said, where the hell did it all go wrong for you? And I just sat there and laughed and I said, gambling. And I said, what about yourself? And he said, oh, well, yeah, it's okay. And I said, have you got a few properties now? And he said, yeah, I've got 9. And I sat there with a sense of pride for him. I was happy for him because I'm not a person that doesn't want to see people do well. But I just thought to myself, it's just different mindsets, different people. And I think it's so important now that people fill their extra time after football with good reason. I think a lot of people turn to computer games, they turn to gambling. And for me, there's so much spare time where they can learn to do positive things that will stand them in good stead for the future. Why people don't let people go into first teams and speak? People will probably say that they're too busy, but busy in their mind is they might have a double session that day, and a double session you're still finished by sort of 1:30, 2 o'clock, whereas most people are slogging away till 5, 6 o'clock. And to try and get a footballer to stay to listen to someone who talks about property, they'll shrug their shoulders, they'll moan, the majority, if I'm brutally honest. If they've got someone come in and talk about finance, they'll go, oh, why have we got a meeting about finance? Because it's just the way of the world. And until you fall out of that bubble of not being involved in football, you probably wish that you had these meetings. You probably wish that you got told about all these businesses and properties that you could get involved in. And I think it really hits home when that bubble bursts. And sometimes when that bubble does burst, it's too late.
Talk Sport and Property Podcast, sponsored by MPH Sports Property Academy. Download the app today from the App Store or Google Play by typing in MPH Sports, the trusted go-to app for sports people looking to buy or learn about property.
I know you bought your place in Aylesbury, which you said is on the market now. Looking at your career, you played for a lot of local teams to where you grew up in. We've got Reading, we've got Aldershot, Wickham. Where did you stay at home during these times? Did you rent or?
Yeah, so I was one of those people that wanted to commute. I liked being at home. It was my sort of safe place. I had my dinner cooked for me every night by my parents until I moved into a 2-bed flat. And then when I played for clubs like Yeovil, they offered me a chance to live in like rented accommodation that was sorted by the club, or I could live in a hotel. And for me, it was always live in a hotel because you get a little bit more time to yourself. A lot of clubs have rented accommodation where there might be 4 lads in a 4-bedroom house, and it was enjoyable at times, which I did for a few weeks on and off at different clubs. But I liked being by myself because I had this secret addiction that was going on. I didn't have anyone looking over my shoulder at what I was doing. I could spin the roulette machine when I wanted to on my phone. I could place bets on horses. But one of the things that I never actually got was a relocation fee. So when players go and sign at new clubs and they get usually £8,000 to go and sign, if they've moved from Manchester down to Crawley, for example, a lot of players I know, they don't actually use it for that. So they might get £8,000 worth of invoices for a new carpet in a place, show the club that they've got £8,000 worth of invoices, and then just move in with one of the other lads. There's so many different ways around it. But I wasn't one of those person that had to relocate. I nearly moved to Australia to go and play football. I nearly moved to America, which would have been different, but everything was sort of put on a plate for me, I guess, from the clubs that I played for. And then you've got players that sign for Reading on big money that I know used to just rent rather than buy because they saw it as like a short-term stepping stone that have gone on to bigger and better things. So I think every player is different depending on whether you've got a family, whether you're single and things like that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The reason why I asked the question about it was because I noticed you had gone to Yeovil, and we often get calls from players who are looking for that sort of 3-month loan move, 6-month loan move, but need somewhere to stay and just need a bit of advice. We often try and encourage, if they are going to go into rented accommodation, is to sort of include all the bills into that as well, because we have experienced where some players have taken out a 6-month let, for example, have gone back to their parent club, but then suddenly, if they're not contacting the utility suppliers and things like that, then those bills are still hitting their doormat, and unfortunately, they're being taken to court. Is that something that you've experienced in football as well? Because that has then a knock-on effect with like your credit, and you can't then suddenly get a mortgage on your next page, and you're thinking, well, hang on a second, how did that happen?
Well, I think football, for the majority of players, is probably the job with the least security. You might go on loan for 3 months or 6 months, but some of the times, if things aren't going well, your loan gets cut short and you're back at your football club. So how do you then sign a 6-month contract with a landlord, pay the money up front, and you could be back home after 3 months? So it's really, really difficult. I'm under the impression that every club should have a clubhouse. Most clubs could afford it. If you look at Yeovil, if they needed a 3-bedroom house, I don't know if it cost between £800 and £1,000 a month. That would save a lot of hassle for these players. And I feel as though most clubs probably do have some sort of rented accommodation for their players. But it's probably not enough, because I've heard some, not horror stories, but I've heard of one lad that was playing at, I won't say a League Two club last year, and he told me he was sleeping on the sofa. So he was sleeping on the sofa in the clubhouse because they didn't have enough room for him and the rest of the players. And then he's expected to perform at a high level on a Saturday. His loan actually got cut short. He went back to his parent club because he said he'd had enough of it. And I just think that's unfair. Like, how can you expect a professional footballer to sleep on the sofa? We're not even talking a sofa bed when he's sleeping in the clubhouse. It's not right. To perform at a high level, you need to get the right rest, the right relaxation. You need to feel comfortable. But this is just a case of maybe lower league clubs struggling for money and trying to get the best bargain out of it, I guess.
Yeah, and we've always made ourselves available to clubs as well to help with that facility, really. Trying to make that player sort of come from one area into another, make that transition into the club that little bit easier, because we know if the player is settled in a property with their family and the kids are at schools or whatever it's going to be, then we just know it's going to have a more positive impact on the pitch, really. And it also just keeps your family settled and more happier. Life for you's obviously, you're in a much better place now. From memory, is it 5-6 years now without a bet?
5.5 years.
5.5 years, which is quite remarkable considering the addiction that you had, really. You also now work for Epic, is that correct?
Yeah, Epic Risk Management.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so obviously I fly around the country, fly around Europe. I spent my last summer in Belgium, traveling out there, speaking to football clubs, speak to every EFL club in this country. So the first team, under 23s and under 18s. We've managed to forge our way into the Premier League as well, to go and speak about gambling awareness and education sessions. So pretty much, long story short, is that I tell my story in the hope that other people can learn from it and not make the same mistakes as I did. If they do have a problem, they can come forward and speak to me and say, listen, Scott, I gamble too much money. I'm lying to my parents. I'm lying to my wife. I'm not spending enough time with the kids because my mind is taken over by the thoughts of gambling. And we've had a large number of players come forward and ask for help. And for me, giving back is the best feeling in the world. I love being able to help people out. Very similar to yourself, obviously. I know you well, and I know that you've got this real passion for property and sport, especially football. And I'm exactly the same when it comes to helping people with gambling, because I know that I suffered in silence. I know that I made a mess of my finances at a young age, and I don't want people to feel the way that I did. So if I can stop that happening and try and push them down the path of help, but push them into the path of the right people that can also help financially, people like yourselves, financial advisors, things like that, then I've done my job. I've done my job, and I know the satisfaction levels that I get from that are immeasurable. So, yeah, it's good. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, Scott, I will also say I've spoken to a lot of players over the past sort of 12, 18 months that have listened to your workshops, that have either listened to your story online last year during lockdown and also in person. It's always been very complimentary. And I think, you know as well as I do how many people suffer with this. So look, keep up the good work, mate. You're doing absolutely fantastic. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. If anyone listening today wants to reach out to you about this subject, how could they get in touch?
Social media is probably the most powerful place you can be right now. I think when you say powerful, I think it's powerful in the way that people are connected. I think sometimes it can be quite toxic. I think that if you actually take the positives from it and try and bury away the negatives, it probably does outweigh the negatives more often than not. But yeah, Scott Davies with an E, 1988 on Twitter. Feel free to fly into my inbox. It's relentless, to be brutally honest. Not just sportsmen, but people in society as well that read my story, see my story, ask for help. I know that obviously we've got a connection with obviously my fiance or whatever in your work, and she gets a little bit annoyed with me being on the phone helping out people in the evenings, but I've got a real passion for it. It's one of those things that if someone said to me at 14, at 32 years old, you're going to be on the phone helping people with gambling problems, I'd be like, well, that's got nothing to do with me. But I've lived a life. I've got a tale to tell.
And you're still playing football, right?
Exactly. Still playing football. So I can't complain, mate. It's one of those things. But the more people that I can help, you can help, the merrier. The world will be a better place, mate.
Yeah, listen, you're doing a great job, Scott. Obviously, talking about sport and property and how we try and encourage players to consider investments and parking their money into property whilst they're playing. You did experience life-changing money at an early age. Let's just finish on what would you do differently to prepare for your life today back then?
I think the one thing I did is disregard my parents' opinion. I think they were very much set on save as much money as you can to get a deposit for your mortgage early on.
No.
And like I said, I did it. I gambled it away. I saved again. And I bought a place. But when I look at the amounts of money, and I'm quite open and honest about what I earned, there was 1 month where I earned £23,000 at the age of 21. And I remember thinking to myself, do you know what? It hit my bank account because I'd got some bonuses from playing in the championship. And the first thing that I thought is, well, do you know what? I can go and spend this, because I had no sort of thoughts about saving it up, being sensible. So I went to the bookies. I went to Bicester Village, which is obviously an outlet place, not far from where we live. And I had a great time. And I look back now and think, if someone put £23,000 in my bank account today, my first thought would be, right, let's buy another property. Let's try and get on the property ladder as quickly as I can, because the property that I've got at the moment that's up for sale, has actually done me quite well. There's a bit of equity in there, a bit of profit, and I feel like I haven't had to work for it. It's been rented out for 4 or 5 years. So someone else has been paying the mortgage, which is great. And I just think to myself, that's one way where it's gone my way. It's gone in a positive direction. And I wish I had a few more of those, but I don't. So
the good news is that many players have had this obsession about property is their thing after training, that they look at, they think about, they talk to their family and friends about, which is really encouraging. That's why we want to keep promoting these stories. Really, we want to sort of change people's lives by consider property as a form of investment. They don't have to do it. There's many very good financial advisors that are mentoring these young players now. But obviously, the quicker you prepare for life after sport, the better, right?
Well, I remember you saying to me when we first had a conversation, and it sticks in my mind quite well, you want players to be addicted to buying property because that was your passion. Like, you want to basically help them out. And for me, it's great. But you can channel your addiction, your motivation, your passion into so many different things. And if you can do it in a way that is going to help you, then it's a no-brainer. Gambling was never going to help me unless I won the national lottery. And that still probably wouldn't have helped me then because I'd have had more money to play with and my bets would have been bigger. With property, obviously, sometimes, I'm sure it goes wrong. Majority of the time it will go right. But I want players now, and I speak to a lot of players at the clubs I go to, and I say, listen, as soon as you get 20 grand, give me a call, all right, and I'll try and point you in the right direction. And these are players that have had issues with gambling, where I say to them, listen, try and channel into building a property portfolio. How good would it be in 5-10 years' time when you've got 3 or 4 properties and the teammate that carried on gambling has got none? So it's just trying to get that balance, I guess, of trying to make it visually clear to the younger players that the watches, the wash bags, the cars aren't that important.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being our very first guest on TalkSport and Property. Thoroughly enjoyed having you on, mate. As you know, good luck with this lockdown. Keep working hard, keep doing what you're doing, and listen, we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure as always.
Cheers, Scotty. Thanks again, mate.
Cheers, mate.
You've been listening to TalkSport and Property. Visit the App Store and download the MPH Sports app today, or keep up with us over on Instagram.